I'm Kristen.
And I'm Maddie.
We're sisters and heavy readers.
Join us every single week to talk stories, interview authors, and collab with fellow book nerds.
Welcome to the Kristen Mad Show.
Welcome back to the show, you guys. When we started this podcast a year ago, it was for the express purpose of recording this episode that we are about to record with the one and only Pierce Brown, the author of the Red Rising Saga. So we're having a very good day.
Oh yeah, we're having the best day. How are you today, Pierce?
Oh, great! Now that I have that information, you guys start this podcast from me.
Yeah,
Maddie's making her husband happy here. What's Kristen's excuse?
I'm just like happy to be happy, honestly. I'm that annoying positive person. I'm like always happy to be here.
No, really. I feel like, so I read Red Rising in 2023, and I feel like we've said pretty much every time we've talked about it that when given the opportunity, we're going to do our best to crawl inside your brain and figure out how this came to be. So that is the goal of today. And we're so glad.
Cranial spelunking. Let's do it.
Yeah. It's going to be a good time. We always want to start out every episode by playing two truths and a lie because, you know, it was fun in college. Why couldn't it be fun now? So you're going to tell us 3 things about you, 2 of which are true, 1 is false, but we have to guess which one is false. Can you do it off the cuff?
Yeah. My first pets were 2 fire-bellied newts named Apollo and Ares.
Of course.
I once, when I was 19, was stuck in Neuschwanstein Castle overnight and had to sleep there.
Uh-huh.
And I once squatted 450 pounds.
Well, dang. If that's true, glutes be strong.
Glutes be strong.
Wow.
Listen.
Ferrets smell so bad.
Listen.
That's a bit sus, bro.
I feel like all of these are lies and that you cheated because I don't think any of those are true.
Really?
Really.
I feel like the names of the ferrets, I was like, well, it checks out. But
Not ferrets, fire-bellied newts. Get my lies straight. Or truths.
wait, why did I turn a newt into a ferret?
I don't know.
What is that?
Do you know what a newt is?
Yes, I had one in high school.
We're going to start asking you questions about Red Rising, and it's going to be
We've
like,
already
names
ruined
you've
this.
Never heard.
Scratch
like,
the interview.
Is this the right book?
Yeah, she's going to be like, when Triss fought against the tyrannical regime. I'm like, is that my book?
Well. Okay. Fire belly newts don't smell like ferrets. Got it. Okay, so I say
But do they smell like bullshit?
See, I think they all smell like bullshit, Spirit. I think they all
No,
smell bad.
the castle one. Maybe
Are you saying I'm not
why
athletic?
I'm
Well,
saying 450
that's a
pounds
lot.
is a bit of weight, sir.
Mm.
I would be crushed to death underneath that much
Unless
weight.
you're like a lean, mean fighting machine. Okay, I
No,
think
no,
that
no,
How
we
no,
say
many 45-pound
no.
plates would have to go on each side for it to be 450 pounds? Do the math.
Maddie, I read. I don't math. Okay.
Well, the point is, I think they're all lies, so you pick.
Okay, I'm gonna say the castle one is false, but I hope it's true because I want to hear that story.
Okay, time to fess up.
Kristen is correct.
Yeah.
I did get trapped in Neuschwanstein Castle, but I did not have to sleep there overnight. I snuck in because, you know Neuschwanstein Castle? It's like the Disney castle created by Mad Baron or King or Duke King von Ludwig. But Ludwig created it, I think it was mid 1800s, but he did it as kind of it's not an old castle, but he did it as trying to capture the romance of the medieval time period. Beautiful castle. Went there in winter. Didn't have money for the tour, so I snuck in behind a tour group and wandered around. And there's certain rooms that are you can view and are equipped, but it's like a 168 room castle. So I wanted to see the other stuff. So I went around and seeing all this other stuff, and I got lost. But I would throw snowballs through the slit windows down at tourists, which is a lot of fun.
Oh,
and
my
then.
God.
Yeah, so then, but then I got lost, and it was closing, and they were like locking up, and I ran and like hailed the last janitor, like closing up the shop, and got out, but it was pitch black, and I didn't have any money for like a fare back, so I had to walk 3 miles back to town. Yeah, it was a very shoestring operation. And yeah.
Unreal.
What the heck? How have you made it to this age?
Also,
I don't know.
How did you
that
bench
entire
450 pounds?
No, not bench. Oh, no way. Squat. I used to have. I just have had in high school very overly developed legs.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm just imagining this like super tiny upper torso and these like giant ass legs.
T-Rex arms, torso, but then these like giant legs. Like I tried on my jeans. I tried on my jeans from high school, and they were like just billowing around me, just billowing. And I remember I was like, I would always read on the internet guys being worried about chicken legs, and I'm like, I'd give anything for chicken legs because the era of skinny jeans was not. The era of skinny jeans was not kind to me. I looked like one of those, it's like every now and then there's like a Turkish fellow, like looking really snazzy and stuff in this kind of sweater, a beige sweater, but like his jeans are like pasted on him. Maybe that's just my algorithm, but I get Turkish haircuts from Turkish barbers where they do like this whole like, they do it to like this crazy music, and then they like slap a lightning bolt on someone's head. And it just looks like a buzz, but then he's got a lightning bolt. But then he comes out and he's in these jeans that have been painted on, and I don't know why. It seems only in Istanbul.
I'm so sorry you missed that, Pierce.
I'm really glad we can unpack this.
Your Turkish barber life.
I should have been Turkish.
Have to say, I don't think skinny jeans were really a good thing for anyone, but that might just be my opinion.
No, but there are certain men that took advantage of it, in unfair ways. The whole like early hipster crowd, they walk around like daddy long legs, and for a while they tricked us into thinking it was cool. And so, here I was just wanting to wear my like baggy Levi's, but no, you look like you don't have like fitted jeans. So.
You know what? You were just ahead of your time, sir.
Yeah. I wish I'd known that then, so I could have just worn the comfortable stuff.
Yeah, no, you really just needed some MC Hammer pants. Those would have fit your legs just fine.
I'm so happy we had this little therapy session here.
I mean, honestly, if you look back on some of my early signings, you'll see like torn jeans that are like skin tight on my thighs, and it's really bad look. And some of my female friends critiqued it, and I really appreciate their sartorial advice to guiding me back toward the light. And a couple of years ago, I got back into my pant game back.
Yeah, we all have to have those phases. It's fine.
Oh my gosh.
It's really okay. If we didn't all have a cringe phase, who would we be?
I'm just like, do we have time? Can I Google this now? Can I see those? I want to see
the worst
picture or it didn't happen.
I think the worst one was like the Morningstar book tour at a signing in where was it? The Barnes & Noble in New York. And I think someone had a comment on it. It's like, he sold a lot of books. Can he afford new jeans? And that haunted me for years. Chased me to this very moment. Yeah.
Wow. You can still recall it like that.
Well, you guys said you wanted to spelunk. Yeah.
We did. Yeah. Yes. I was just about to say, like, our very first question here is like, we need a little bit of lore, please. And we need to know, like, give us some context on Pierce so we can kind of understand. But I was thinking we were going to go into, like, your literary influences instead.
Oh, no.
Skinny jeans.
No.
You know what I mean?
Skinny jeans and thunder thighs. That's what makes the Red Rising world tick.
Yeah, clearly. I feel like we know so much now. Yeah. This is what we needed. So is there any other context we should know about you? Like, I think I heard somewhere that your granddad was a big influence for you. And I thought maybe we'd ask you about that. And maybe, I think I also heard maybe you hopped schools a lot. And I don't know if those things play into you becoming a writer, but anyway, we just want the context. We want the lore.
Give us the lore.
Please take the reins, because if we don't need to talk about that and we just need to talk about more socially interesting fashion faux pas, let's do that.
Socially, I love that. So my grandpappy was a big influence, but I didn't realize it at the time. It was kind of like about 4 years ago when I was recounting to a friend, my grandpa, and kind of sometimes when you talk, you put ideas together, at least I do. And I was talking about my grandpa and how he would always, story time with grandpa was the best. He was telling me a story about when he was a kid. He grew up in the Mississippi Delta, and there was such a bad flash flood. He was drinking Coca-Cola when he told me this, and there was a flash flood that was so crazy that it was like 4 days long, and him and his sisters, I think 4 of his sisters, had to find refuge on the roof of their barn. and the barn's foundation got so deteriorated from the flash flood that it severed the barn roof from the barn, and so they're floating for several days on this barn roof, surviving only off of Coca-Cola. And it wasn't until I told my friend this story out loud at probably 33 years of age that I realized that's not true. That was never true. But I held all this, and I didn't re-examine it ever until I was saying it out loud. I'm like, the grandpa was just using that as an excuse to say, because I asked him why he likes Coca-Cola, only drinks Coca-Cola. And he says Coca-Cola will save your life. And then creates this story. It probably rained really hard, sure, Grandpa. But, did it flash flood for 4 days and you were rescued on top of a roof surviving with your 4 sisters off of Coca-Cola? No. Right? You're just diabetic and you need to own it, Grandpa.
Okay.
But his story is so much better.
My grandpa would wake me up in the middle of the night. When I was a kid, I'd be 5 years old. He'd wake me up in the middle of the night, escort me to the cupboard or the pantry, and said, "Now, Pierce, tell Grandpa where your dad hid the cookies." Because my grandpa would wake up in the middle of the night, and he's diabetic, like bad diabetic, and he'd be so my dad would hide all the sweets. And so Grandpa would convince me to tell him where the sweets were, and then I remember I one time showed him, and my grandpa ate 6 of them, and then he said, "And one for you," and it was eating more. And then my dad, who has these very intense eyes, my friends would always joke that he's a CIA operative because he's just very deep set, dark eyes. And he comes around the corner just glooming, all 6'3", just starey. And my grandpa and I were just caught, And I'm pretty sure my grandpa blamed me. So my grandpa was a yarn spinner, a tall tale teller, veteran of a couple wars, and carried the scars of it. And I think that he instilled within me that storyteller gene. Unfortunately, my grandpa, I think, it turned into more of a, how would I say it? Well, telltale telling. I don't think he ever got it down on paper, but he definitely had the knack for it.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I was going to say, have you found any journals where he put all of his stories?
He wasn't that kind of man, really, to do that. He's more of the oral tradition, I suppose. He never. I don't think he really thought about recording things for other people or posthumously. He was very much from an old world. He played the harmonica and could play anything on the harmonica. And then when I knew him, he was about 60 years on, 70 years on. And so he would drive around the Midwest with that car from what's it called? Is it the station wagon from so it's a station wagon. I was thinking the car from Back to the Future, but that's a different car. There's a blue station wagon with that wood walnut siding. And from the back, there was enough antennas poking out of it to look like he could communicate with aliens. And I'm pretty sure he was trying, but he was an old ham radio operator because he was a radio operator for a time in Korea. And he would just drive around and chat with ham radio guys. He's very much 20s or born maybe even before that. But I don't even think it occurred to him to share his stories in written form,
Yeah. So would he be a Red?
Oh.
Yeah. My family has been in America a long time and blue collar all the way down. They would have been Reds from get-go. Yeah. A lot of ne'er-do-wells and farmers and mechanics in the family. Yeah. The new generation's a bit different, but they go back pretty deep on my mom and dad's side. Midwesterners by way, I think, of Tennessee, and just follow path of migration.
Amazing.
Yeah, Midwest.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been to Indiana, but it's pretty cool over here.
I've been to Indiana a lot. Most of my family was from Iowa. So mom and dad were both from big families in Iowa.
Oh, man.
Really? Gosh, the last time we were in Iowa, we were travel yodeling.
We were travel yodeling.
A long time
travel
ago.
yodeling?
We were 12.
Where did you yodel?
It was a different time.
Yeah, 12-year-old you is still you.
Yeah, I mean, iconic, right? But that's great. So, siblings? Do you have siblings? Do they write?
I got an older sister, and she was very, very good at poetry from a young age. We're pretty different, I think. But she never got into storytelling per se, but I think that she found an emotional outlet in writing poetry. I mean, she was always doing it. Is funny, but we do cross over in terms of books a lot of times. That fixations on we went to almost every Harry Potter together. Some of my best memories are going to the premiere of the seventh with her, in a small town in Edmonds, Washington. And so we went to this little local movie theater, with those seats that are all kind of flat. So you're peeking around. But yeah, my sister Blair, we're very close. And we had to be because we lived in 8 different states. And so I went to, I think, 10, maybe 11 different schools. I lose track. So I was always the new kid. And she was always the new kid too, but I think it's a hell of a lot easier for boys. If you can kick a ball, you're good as a boy. It's pretty much that simple. And we don't have nearly the social hierarchy and politics that girls had, at least not in high school back then.
Golly, and you probably could kick those balls real far with those legs. So.
Oh, yeah. When that tree trunk of a leg, yeah. Well, I had to cover up the fact. Here's the thing. I had to cover up the fact that my first pets were fire-belly newts named Apollo and Aries. I didn't know. How'd I say it? Growing up in the 90s, it wasn't really socially accepted to be a nerd. And when you're always the new kid, you're like, well, I better kick that ball real good.
Oh my God,
I would go to
a closeted nerd.
Yeah, well, I'd go to a new school and the cool kids there would be named literally. Well, can I say their names? Is that rude?
Yeah, no, you can do that.
I haven't seen them forever. One kid's name, he was very cool and blonde, buzz cut, 1994, and he's 7 years old, and his name is Luke Savage. And then the other kid's got this floppy hair, and he's more like the romantic poet type, but he's 7, and his name's Eric King. And then so they show up, and I'm like, I'm gonna kick this ball. Do you want to hear about my newts?
Yes.
No, yeah, because I was obsessed with animals. I had fire-belly newts, turtles, over 50 different types of frogs over the course, from 4 to 14. I would build terrariums. My dad they were so cool about books and the terrarium stuff. They would just sponsor me. I mean, I'd have to do if I really wanted that great pump. That great filtration pump, I'd have to do chores and yard work and stuff.
Amazing.
But I'd have so many terrariums even from an early age because I loved building the worlds in there. You'd have to get a humidifier for the tree frogs, and then you get foliage and all the stuff. And then I finally graduated to this huge, huge tank, bigger than my arms can stretch. For a turtle, it was half land, half water, and I had a waterfall that I built into it and a little river. So there'd be a water section. It's about about yay deep, and then the rest would be land, and then in the land section I could put plants and moss and crickets for the frogs. So the frogs and the newts would be over here, and then I'd have my turtle over here, and the water would get sucked up from the filtration here and go here. But the problem was I had a variety of turtles, started with box turtles, then painted turtles, but then I was given a turtle by a lady who taught me to ride horses at her farm in North Carolina. And she gave me this little turtle that was the size of a $50, and I named it Freddy. And so we did, but Freddy was an amazing turtle, right? But here's the thing: we did a lot of cross-country trips when we were going back and forth. So every year we would go to Iowa to spend 3 weeks at my grandma's house, and couldn't leave Freddy behind. And then we also, moved a lot. And each time we moved, we did a big old Suburban, and my sister would feign car sickness. She still says she has it. So she'd get this big middle row, and I'd be stuck in this back little thing, but I'd be stuck back there with Freddy, my turtle. And it'd be in this circular, lidless, I don't know why lidless, that was so dumb, aquarium. And she'd be sloshing around, and the water would get kind of poopy after a while because turtles, believe it or not, get motion sick. So Freddy's just shitting himself back there. I'm reading these Star Wars books,
I love your childhood.
Freddy kept getting bigger and bigger. So with each move, it's imagine cutscenes in a movie. Freddy's getting bigger and bigger, and slowly it becomes apparent that Freddy is not any ordinary turtle. Freddy is an alligator snapping turtle. Have you guys ever seen those?
No.
So there's the common snapping turtle, then there's the alligator snapping turtle. The alligator snapping turtle sits with its mouth open underwater. Its head can get the size of Labradors. And it sits with its mouth open, these great hinged jaws that are serrated, and it dangles its tongue out like it's a worm. These guys are predators that have not had to evolve in 90 million years. So slowly becomes apparent that Freddy is terrifying. But I'm in the back seat still with Freddy in the increasingly too small aquarium that we transported Freddy in, and Freddy be sloshing and be like, right? Which was all cute when Freddy was this big. When Freddy got to be the size of to clean the tank, we'd have to take Freddy out. My dad would put on these kind of reinforced gloves and take out Freddy, and Freddy just be like, just like hissing, like terror. And my dad, my dad's, he's like an Iowa farm boy. He wasn't they weren't on a farm, but he's just like very manly, kind of traditionally 1950s, dad jeans and doing shit. And chopping wood and building log cabins and building swing sets and fixing everything. And my dad's like, turns out when we moved to Arizona, snapping turtles are illegal in the state because they get to a certain size where everyone I think has the kind of epiphany that I had is, I have a serial killer in my house. Mm-hmm. And so they release them into the local ponds or lakes and they decimate the local wildlife because these sweet little fish that are in these lakes that are, man-made lakes in Arizona are like, what the fuck is that? That's like that's a dinosaur. And so finally, didn't know what to do with this. My mom worked for a local TV station there, and she had connection to a local zoo. So we took it to a local zoo because they needed another snapping turtle to mate with their snapping turtle. So so I go back into the back of the zoo, and I think it's like the coolest thing ever, right? Because zoos were, in the 1990s, zoos were the thing. It was like,
they're not still the thing?
Well, it wasn't. Well, now now you know about animal rights. Now, now they carry a certain sadness. But to me, that was like Hollywood. It's like, here's where the magic is. Zookeepers were awesome.
Oh my God.
They had those like kind of Steve Irwin tan short shorts and stuff. Yeah. Like SeaWorld was awesome in the 90s before we knew about blackfish. And suiciding or unaliving of killer whales in captivity, right? Horrible.
Right. Horrible.
Does the awareness that it brings balance out the horror? I don't know. I'm not the jury. But now that thought's in my head. But back then I was like, this is fucking cool. And so then they put my snapping turtle in with their snapping turtle, and they put it in with this thing that looks like it's been surviving on like antelope and steroids, and it immediately mounts my turtle and starts thrusting, and I'm like, what's happening? What's going on? And then they say, and then the zookeeper says they're mating, and I said, I thought you said your turtle was a boy. What is he doing to Freddy? And then they says, well, he is a boy, and your turtle's a girl. And then my sister just is standing there. She just puts her hands on her hips and says, Frederica.
Frederica!
We have so many things to unpack.
It's really the trauma that makes us at an early age. Yeah.
It's trauma, but also like, I loved the 90s. I'm so glad we got to experience it. I kind of want you to put out like a children's book, and it's like the story of your turtle, like
Freddy.
In the back seat, but you might have to leave like the thrusting bits out. I mean, but keep in the Frederica.
Why should we deny the circle of life? We all got here somehow. Do we need to go into it?
Agreed. Here's the thing. I feel like there was so much to unpack there, from your world building of your terrariums to like
so cool,
the most enviable turtle of all time with the waterfall. By the way, my daughter's name is Freddy.
Frederica.
But her name is not Frederica. It's
only
Freddy.
Well, Freddy's gender neutral. So I think my sister really was the one that, wasn't woke at a young age, and I was, because my turtle could have gone either way, and I was comfortable with that.
Yeah. You know what? I feel like your turtle could be a metaphor for my daughter, because she came into this world so gentle, just slept her entire first 9 months of life. And the older she gets, the more ferocious it is.
Yeah, she really is Frederica.
She really is a baby dinosaur.
I love that you made fun of her motion sickness. Like, that's not a real thing. Some of us do have the motion sickness. It is a real sickness, Pierce.
We all have discomfort.
Some of us are very discomforted, okay?
We all have discomfort. Some of us just need to make others adjust for our discomfort, and other ones just get on with it.
Yeah.
Okay, Maddie, I don't know how to segue, because that was just like the best conversation of all time.
We can easily segue from here. Obviously, your lore That explains so much. So let's get right into the
Let's do it.
saga that was birthed from that
From a
foundation.
turtle, I guess. Now we know it's from a turtle.
High level, can you tell us what is Red Rising and who should read it?
In the future, humankind, tired of the wars on Earth and the conflicts here, decides to set out to conquer the solar system and terraform it to be habitable by man. In doing so, they established a base on the moon. In establishing that base, they decided that there should be efficiency in space and leave the hierarchies and the social restrictions and the prejudices of old Earth behind and create new prejudices. In order to do this, they created a hierarchy for labor, and it was really constructed off of this book, Plato's Republic, and the dialectic between Plato and some other philosophers. Well, actually, made-up philosophers. Sophocles, Plato's doing. Anyway, in that dialectic, they discuss, what the perfect way for a nation-state to be governed is, and they come up with a meritocracy. So, in the Red Rising world, there are 14 different colors based on 14 different castes based on the color of your eyes and the symbols on your hands. People are bioengineered, started as eugenics and bioengineered to be psychologically and physically predisposed to certain tasks in society. At the bottom, you have the reds, who are the manual laborers, and you have various different colors throughout: blues to pilot ships, grays to keep the peace and to serve as a barrier between the low colors and those at the top. And then over all this, you have the golds, who were created to be shepherds over humanity. They were a summation of most humanist principles, studied in art, philosophy, longer lived, more physically fit, and superior genetically in almost every way. But, unfortunately, they forgot their role 700 years into their reign as shepherds and slowly became tyrants. And the story of Red Rising is about a red trying to bring down that tyranny.
Yes.
Jeez, that was crazy.
So the question of who should read it is basically everyone, but
Sure, like turtles.
Specifically,
Turtles.
Specifically, we always recommend your work to people who love a fast-paced plot,
A chosen one tale.
a chosen one, a found family, and if you are if you're a sci-fi lover, absolutely you will love books 2 through 6. If you are unsure about science fiction, this could be your gateway drug.
It's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was intended to straddle that line between science fiction and fantasy. For me, it feels like a fantasy world. I obey all the rules that I create, but I look at the Matrix as a perfect precedent for how you should establish rules and follow those rules within a story. And simply because the reader is then more comfortable than, as opposed to not knowing all the rules, and then some rule just gets made up and then they get saved for some ridiculous reason you didn't know was possible. But I think that the science of my books is intentionally vague or explained in a simple way in order to focus on the characters, because I look at my setting as sci-fi, but while I love hard sci-fi from the 60s, 50s, 70s, even today, and there are titans among us, Aaron Lecky's book, Ancillary Justice, is phenomenal if no one's read it, or if you guys haven't read it. I really appreciate hard sci-fi, but I've never been trying to do hard sci-fi.
Okay.
I've always been inspired by Dune in the church type of mythology that it has, as well as historical fiction, where a lot of the inspiration for the books come from, and also in a lot of the motifs and that it uses. I'm also inspired by Shakespeare, Count of Monte Cristo, and I think that more than anything, more than sci-fi or fantasy, those are just the trappings. I think a lot of times my book is fundamentally an adventure book.
Yeah. And I feel like it's one of those books where you can start out feeling like it's one way. I feel like book one has this tone, and it was so perfect for gripping the teenage Hunger Game girl in me that I loved as a kid, right? And Ender's Game and stuff. But man, it just goes wild. I mean, it's like the wild, wild west out there in those back 3 books. I can't wait for book 7. Can you like dumb this down for me? Can you talk to us about Antigone? Like literally pretend we're in elementary school. Will you just like explain this to us? Because like we have not really read a lot of Greek classics. I know, surprising.
Or
Like,
Roman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well-
We know Homer,
But that's like
about
it.
And yes, Mitch, for those of you who don't know, Mitch is me, Maddie, my husband. He he was reading Red Rising, he was like, this is baked with classic references. I love the classics, has like the philosophers in there, and I was like, you lost me.
I said help, SOS.
So we would love, talk to us like we're dumb, if you don't
So
mind.
and the nice thing is that stuff's informative, but I never wanted it to be a barrier of entry.
It's not at all, but now I feel like I want to know. I feel like they're like Easter eggs.
Yeah.
So Socrates, or Sophocles, it was a great Theban playwright, and we don't have the bulk of his stories, but the best of survived. Basically, at a weekend festival, his best plays were put on, the most popular ones. So we got that weekend festival of plays. In them is the story of Antigone. Antigone takes place after a civil war has divided Thebes. The rebels had two of Antigone's brothers, I think maybe one or two, had a brother of Antigone on one side and a brother of Antigone on the other. Antigone and her brothers were the sons and daughters of the former king.
Okay.
And Oedipus. I'm sure you know Oedipus Rex.
Yes. Okay.
Oedipus.
An Oedipal complex. Yes. Like
I'm nodding, but
is in love with his mother.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Well, we can go into Oedipus too, but basically Oedipus died and left his kids, and his kids had a civil war. One side was looked at as rebels, and then one side was looked at as loyalists. The loyalists in Thebes ended up being ruled by a tyrant, and that was a political post back then. It didn't have anything to do with his morality. But the tyrant of Thebes was a man named Creon. Creon had a son who was engaged to Antigone. So the new tyrant had his son engaged to Antigone, who had 2 brothers die in the war. After the war, Creon said that no rebels will be buried. Anyone who buries a rebel will die. Because he wanted to move on and establish a new rule. But Antigone, so in Greek religion of the time, unless you receive sacred burial rites, your soul is forever stuck in purgatory, and you'll never be able to move on to their equivalent of heaven. And Antigone decided that she was going to bury her brothers, rebels or not, and the story really starts with that fundamental understanding, that decision, and follows her stubbornness the entire way through, and her resistance against Creon, who pleads with her, in like almost a very nice way, don't put me in this position. I told the entire city that this was a rule, and I can't let it pass just because I like you and you're going to marry my son. Her betrothed pleads for her to change her mind, but she's set in her ways, showing a lot of different virtues. Stubbornness, the crazy ideas of youth to challenge authority, and also conviction in loyalty.
Yeah.
And so by the end of the play, she buries her brother and is executed. But that story has echoed 2,500 years.
Yeah.
And in a lot of those times, most of that time, the stories of women have been drowned out by the tides of men and tides of history. So I thought, why is that story so powerful to echo so long? And so that's where Red Rising came from initially, a collision between Plato's Republic and Antigone. Plato's Republic provided the inspiration for the class structure and the kind of philosophical angle and the question of governance, but Antigone was the first character. Io was the first character. Darrow, the protagonist through most of the story, is actually only came to be after I had Io. And if you look at it, and I'm not going to ruin anything, but Io is the one with the agency throughout the entire first part of the book. She's the one whose decisions shape the plot. Darrow, he doesn't do anything. He just reacts to things. And in many ways, the first line I had for Red Rising was, there's a flower that grows on Mars that is red and harsh and fit for our soil. It is called Haemanthus. It means blood blossom. And I was reading that in this 19th century botany book I had, English botany book that I picked up at a flea market. And I stumbled on that word, and it collided with these other stories I was reading. And I always thought of Io as Haemanthus. And so that's how Red Rising really began.
Oh, wow.
It's cool to hear that lore. Gosh, I remember.
You can't see them. I have Haemanthus flowers
Yeah.
tattooed.
Oh, you
right
do?
here.
Yeah, that's amazing. Are they?
Good.
They're not the real flower. Are they the interpretation of the flower?
Correct.
Or, yeah, the real flower is not as pretty as those.
No, this looks kind of like a really rugged tulip.
That's how I wanted it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how my artist interpreted it. It has more petals than a tulip, and the stem is really thick, like a dandelion stem. Like it's like a really hardy stem. But yeah, I showed her like some inspiration, but I actually just like read her a little bit of the description, and when I was like, I'm gonna get a tattoo for Red Rising, and I thought I could get a wolf, I could get one of the house emblems, I could get a favorite line. I almost got howlers a couple times, and I was just like, and I just kept coming back to the manthus flowers. So, anyways, I love that. Thank you for explaining it. I feel less dumb now.
Or dumb? No, just we focus on different things,
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Okay, so this is where we get into some of the themes based on that. So we brought up the caste system that you got from Plato's Republic a couple times. And so for those who don't know, and obviously for those who do, that caste system that's built on meritocracy with like the highest producers and the most to offer at the top, or like the most valuable resource at the top. Can you explain that to us like we're in first grade? Like what is your meritocracy system? Are we meant to interpret it as like the lower you go in the pyramid, the less valuable the work, or the less valuable the people?
Where does value come from?
Right.
Demand and scarcity. So the lower you go in the totem pole, and it's a pyramid shape. So the lower you go, there may be a high demand for your skill set, but there's also a high supply of you. So you are not rare. Your skill is not rare. The higher you go, the more scarce your skill set. The harder to probably make and find that you are, the more specific the job requirements. That's why manual labor is at the bottom. And close behind manual labor is sexual slavery, is entertainment. There is a caste known as the pinks, male and female. Pinks are born to a life of service to the other colors. If you look at history, it's often the case. In order to supply look back. I mean, you can look at any time. You can look at modern time right now, but let's just look at a glaring example of the pleasure battalions that the Japanese cultivated from Korean women. They had these pleasure battalions, and they would, and if you are venting a certain kind of energy towards an acceptable victim, you are easier to control. And so Red Rising is constructed on that. A lot of times I studied political science and found some very interesting books in that. And governments often cultivate the hatred of the neighbor, because while you're hating your neighbor, and it's easier to hate your neighbor, it's very difficult to do the mental stretch to hate the person above your neighbor, way above your neighbor, because your neighbor sucks. They're always mowing their yard on weekends, And so as long as you have someone petty hatred and petty lust and these types of things, you're distracted from worrying about the overall problem. So the society is constructed like that. So then above this lower class, so you have the labor, expendable labor, shorter lives, smaller in stature. Then you have the pinks. You also have the obsidians, who are a gladiatorial class, are meant for entertainment and physical violence. But so you have the beasts. But to control beasts, what do they have? They have dogs. They have greys. Greys are the thin line of titanium that separates the low class, the mob, from the middle class and the upper class. And so a lot of times the hatred then stops at the greys, because it's really hard to fundamentally pass it on up the ladder. So at each way, there's a checkpoint to where your animosity will go, to the one limiting you. Who are you going to hate more? The gray, who hanged your mom for speaking out, or esoterically the gold, whom you've never seen.
Right.
So I think that the society's kind of structured based on that. But the jobs are very specific. Like the blues are astronavigators, and were cultivated to be more tolerant of low gravity and a higher tolerance to radiation, because meat is very hard to keep alive in space. But they also have different social values. Instead of having the traditional family structure, which is cultivated in the lower classes like the Reds, in order to explore the solar system, what's really important for long voyages? Getting along. So they're raised in sects, communes, having one mother or one father in common with 90 kids. And so they're raised in ways the social structures promote their job. And that goes on, with regard to the yellows, who are primarily involved in the sciences of medicine, the silvers, who primarily run the economy. Each part of each caste is structured to the best of the gold's understanding of a political science way of controlling, but also optimizing performance. And every place on the hierarchy is trying to defend their place in the hierarchy from the one below them, because when do people get upset? When their ego is threatened, right? When do they get violent or reactive? And ego threat is simply an existential threat against identity. So they identify with their place in the ladder, and if someone from the lower caste of society does something to jeopardize that, that's an existential ego threat, right? And so there's a natural oppression built into the order that doesn't have to be policed all the time by a police state.
So how much of this did you deconstructively create just by thinking through, these are the roles we need to see in a society, so let's create a color for each of these roles, versus how much of this directly came from your inspiration?
Oh, I think in Plato's Republic they only have 4 different castes,
Okay.
if I remember correctly. I was inspired by David Foster Wallace. He wrote Infinite Jest, but he also wrote like 25-page articles for like GQ and Playboy and the New Yorker, back when they actually had articles, all of them, back when they were actually magazines. But he wrote about his time on a cruise ship, and I think it was a Greek cruise liner, so all the captain and the upper staff were all Greek. But then each nationality was subcontracted to a contractor. So then the bus boys would all be Ethiopian. The janitors would all be another nationality. And it was all based on, who they were doing their subcontracting with. It had nothing to do with race. It had everything to do with where that kind of labor was found abundantly and who farmed it out, right? And so Ethiopia probably had less of an infrastructure developing captains. And also, without being ownership, the Greek-owned company would want to have Greek captain, right? And so I also read that, and I think that informed a bunch of the different roles.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because it doesn't feel made up. When you read it, it's why does this make so much sense? It seems like you did just pull it from history, from somewhere real, because it feels so real.
I don't know about you, Maddie, but I had to make myself a key.
I know. I looked.
I said, "Listen, I love a good rainbow."
I don't think we thought about that until the second book of putting in the pyramid.
It's so nice.
Yeah. Some of us visual readers.
Those poor audiobook readers. I'm trying to keep track of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although, is it Tim Gerard? But that does your audiobook?
Tim Gerard Reynolds. Yeah.
Yeah, he's phenomenal.
Oh, I partied with those audiobooks.
He's terrific, isn't he? Yeah.
I think I did Morningstar on audio, and I was like, oh man, what have I been missing?
When I listen to him, I often forget that I wrote it, because it feels separate from me, and that's really fun.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, what a pleasure to have him. He's a massive talent. I thought I was going to narrate the books, and then I heard his audio sample, and I was like, never mind.
Actually, I'm just going to sit back down.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, my hubris can take a backseat to excellence.
Yes.
Dude, that's so cool though. I feel like so I did the whole thing on audio, but I'm really excited to do immersion, I think, on this second read because I loved the audio and also like there's something so intimate about being with the physical page, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
with your eyeballs.
Yeah, there's
I
no interpreter but your brain. Yeah, like
yeah,
even because his pacing might be different than the pacing with which you want to read, right? And
Yeah.
also,
exactly.
there's visual learners and auditory learners, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I like audiobooks for nonfiction, but I like fiction books the way I grew up reading them, which is the page. Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting. I don't know if I've ever created that separation before, but yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
This leads us. You
I know.
segued us perfectly.
I'm going to have to read this one because this question took us a while. We were both like, we both have this question. How do we word it? Okay. Is peace even possible in the world you've created? The quote is, I would have lived in peace, but my enemies brought me war. In a world of enhancements that you've created, is a democracy even possible? Can a faction like the Reds, who are behind in experience politically and genetically smaller and weaker than other factions, hope to compete or contribute at the same level?
I feel like this is the question you really, really wrestle with in Iron Gold, but
Well,
I'm like, is it even
Yeah.
possible? Like,
So is it even possible? Nascent republics have always struggled. The Reds have an advantage that the lower classes have always had, and that's the answer to the question of how do sheep kill a lion. And if you read the books, you know the answer is by drowning him in his own blood. So, in terms of winning the war, it all depends on how much blood they're willing to bleed. In terms of managing a victory, I think then we're talking about human nature. And if anyone says that they have the answer to that, I'd be highly suspect of their books. So my books are far more about the negotiation of between our desire for order and our natural need for liberty. And if you look at any system of government, there is any system of government is um, somewhere on that continuum. And I think that governments vying for control or fighting or uprisings, etc., is simply a challenge to the thesis of you want to be here on the continuum or you want to be here on the continuum. How much liberty are you willing to sacrifice for order, for predictable prosperity, albeit limited? And I think that, like, if we look at our modern day, capitalism is very good at providing a lot of reasons to not have violent upheaval. Because capitalism, if you look at world literacy rates, if you look at per capita GDP, world literacy rates, I forget the actual number, but I think it's in the 90s now, where it used to be down like 15, 20%. If you look at GDP per capita, I think it's like maybe 10 to 20x what it used to be. So capitalism is very good at giving creature comforts, and creature comforts curb the natural willingness to risk them. So the more comfortable you are, the more imaginative you have to be to believe that with the chaos you invite, you will have a better life. So will you rebel and risk everything? Will you break the law? I mean, right?
yeah.
People want to steal things. People want to kill people. People want to do a lot of stuff. What are they really doing? Is it always a moral reason that holds them back? No, I don't think so. I think a lot of times, and laws exist because if you're willing to do this, then you have to trade your entire life to be behind bars. You have to sacrifice everything else in your life. And so I think within Red Rising, it's in the gift of science fiction and fantasy and fiction in general, is to be able to take these theses and see them in a time lapse, to see them, grow from nut to from acorn to tree over the course of several hundred or several thousand pages. Where in our own lives, you can only look back at history. We don't know what point we are in our cycle as a nation or really as an empire for America. And so, I don't think it's a way to predict the future. There's that old saying that history repeats itself, but I'm much more a fan of the saying history doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. And so I didn't coin that. I forget who did, but I think that the central thing that I like to address in Red Rising, and I don't have an answer for this, is the negotiation between order and liberty, right?
Yeah. I mean, you can see it in the pages. I think my question for anybody who doesn't know, we are waiting on the final book of the installment, Red God.
Yeah, I'm still trying to answer that question. So
yes, that's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
I mean, I don't by any means feel like you've written yourself into a corner, and I have no doubts that you're going to land it. Like I'm no doubts whatsoever.
General plot wise, no, not at all. There are a lot of plots though, so that's the
Yes.
thing: is how do I make the ending seem inevitable but shocking nonetheless?
Oh, I have every faith, but I do think when we wrestle with the themes of the story, I think you were doing one thing in the first trilogy, and I think you've answered that in your, without spoilers, in your anecdote with the sheep and the lion. I think that what is so interesting and open about, and why we've had so many good conversations with so many people about your era too, if you will, is that question of, okay, if we decide that the meritocracy is fucked and won't work, but you've already genetically enhanced these castes, is democracy going to work either? And if not that, then what? Like, I don't know. I'm like, a democracy where every caste has an equal voice and an equal power and an equal share does sort of ride on this idea that all men are created equal. I mean, that's what it says in the United States Constitution, right? Is this idea that all men are created equal. Well, they're not. In Red Rising, they're not. They're not equally powerful. They're not equally intelligent. They don't have equal experience. We're talking about like centuries of political experience.
But it's actually saying the same thing. All men were created equal. Not that all men are equal in talent, skills. People are equal in rights. People are not equal.
Oh, man.
Well, sheesh.
Mitch and I go round and round in circles over this, because it's like, I believe that a meritocracy is fucked. I fundamentally believe that. And also, I'm like, okay, I don't know how to talk about this without spoilers.
I know.
But I feel like in Dark Age, there's all of this plot in Dark Age that just beautifully actually shows how incompetent certain factions are at contributing politically. And I'm just like,
yeah, it's rough to watch.
I just don't actually think that it's productive for them to have a seat at the table, even though all the decisions being made at the table affect them. And I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what to do with that disgusting belief that I have, but it's there. It's for sure there. I'm like, get out of here. I don't want you at the table. You're not being productive.
The Weimar Republic, to name just one example from history, a republic that was set up after the monarchy, constitutional monarchy in Germany lasted until, and it was a representative democracy, I believe, which is, we have a two-party system. If 80,000 people voted, you get like 12 members into parliament. So the Nazis got a toehold by getting, a few members elected, and then slowly got more of a toehold, until they were like 22%. I think that you could argue that there's so many examples in history where a lot of the representatives have their eyes focused on their feet, or maybe on their next bribe, or maybe on their next meal, or the person in front of them, or the person behind them, or to the side of them, whatever metaphor you want. And then there's the people that have their eyes fixed on the horizon. And I think that, you cite Hitler as an example. He had his eyes fixed on the horizon, right? And so you see this constantly in rises to power of populists, rises to power of many political figures. So the Red Rising world, I think, is no different, because you had a political party that was being influenced by what the rebellion failed to gain them, the promises that they were made, the agreements that their leaders, when they came out of the mines, did accept. Now, yes, they accepted them. Imagine you accepting a lucrative, what seemed like a lucrative offer for your family farm, only to find out, even though there might be oil there, only to find out if you'd held on to that farm, you'd be, generationally wealthy. But instead, you got, a payout and then got introduced to the wide, wide world that could offer you more dopamine in terms of gambling, sex, drugs, rip-offs, etc., than your naive brain was accustomed to facing. And so all of a sudden you're impoverished, right? And you see this through myriad slave societies throughout history who have been freed only to enter into a world whose rules they are not equipped to handle, and often find themselves back in the same job that they escaped from. And it's kind of how would I say, it's a cruel trick emancipation can sometimes play. And you see that in American history. You see that in history of a lot of countries. But Red Rising wasn't meant to be a reflection of any specific time in history. Just more something I see that's fundamental. Yeah. So there's also a theory at play in Red Rising, which I really like. There's two presiding theories within political science: Great Man theory. I think it's called the title theory, or the. But anyway, I forget the second theory is called. My brain's mush today. But it's basically, do great people shape history, or do tides inevitably lift someone up above the masses to be a figurehead for shaping history? Red Rising is also a lot about that. And I think, not to say what happened to the Vox Populi, but the Vox Populi greatly believed, in the tide. And that thesis was obviously challenged by a few individuals, right? That proved to be their own, won't ruin anything. So I look at Red Rising as like a big sandbox to play with all these ideas. And hopefully I don't present too many conclusions, because my opinions have shifted from when I started writing the series at 22. And so as well as have the depth of the books, hopefully. And so I hope it just helps readers to think about some of these questions themselves and entertains them along the way.
It surely does. I feel like it's very clear and works very well for the series because it's a time-spanning, decade-spanning saga. That it is clear that the ideas and the fundamental things they're fighting for in book 1 have blown up and become much more convoluted by the time you're in books 4 and 5. And so that's crazy.
Yeah, but I think there's so many things to draw on. Like with it, I'm sorry. One of the other things I wanted to mention was, if you look at the Great Terror in the when the French monarchy collapsed and the French had their revolution, and led much as America's revolution was by primarily men in their 20s. Robespierre, I think, was 23 when he made his, debut, and they held on to power for a while and reigned in terror and were more savage even than the monarchy in many ways. And then that led to what? Attempts to reestablish the monarchy, which then gave way to what? Populist figure in Napoleon, which then, became an empire, which lasted 14 to 20 years, and then fell back into the monarchy, So
right back where we started.
So it's the negotiation, as I said, between order and liberty is always ongoing.
Yeah, I think it's clear. It's clear, as you've written, that it ebbs and flows, and it's like we think we have an answer, and then we try it, and it's like, oh shit.
Well,
and then
there's just lots of echoes. Like I feel like there's constantly echoes of we've been here before, or I've heard this before, and it was from a different cast, or it was from a different person's mouth, but now we're hearing it again because, gosh, what's that Wheel of Time quote you told me?
Oh, no, that doesn't apply here.
Oh, that's how
the wheel weaves as the wheel wills.
The wheel, yeah.
Well, one of my, originally, before I started really getting into the nitty gritty of the politics of your world and just the ideas presented, I think the theme that hit me hardest and what made me a Red Rising fan started in book 1. And to me, it was that you could write leaders the way I believe leaders should be. And granted, there are no perfect ones, but I think because your leaders hold themselves accountable, to me, I was like, oh, here's a book, and what became a series about the weight of leadership. And so we've actually focused on that a lot as we've talked about the series. And so I just wanted to throw it to you to chat a little bit about how you did it. I think for me, the scene in Red Rising, no spoilers, where a certain leader decides to take the punishment of the person following them or not following them, but who should follow them. And decides like, if the people I'm leading are going to make these mistakes and need punished, then the buck stops with me. Then that responsibility is also mine. And then that gets echoed in Morningstar with Severo and Cassius. So I just wanted to throw it to you to talk a little bit about how whether you do that intentionally, I guess, or not. But definitely.
Well, now he's going to say he does for sure.
For sure. I even think a little bit with Cassius and Lysander, but we can't get too far into that.
Yeah, don't get
spoilers,
into
but
it.
I just see the echo of it. Like book after book after book is just this theme that like to really lead with any kind of influence and trust, you have to be willing to take responsibility for the failure, your own failure, but also the failure of people following you.
I think that leadership should always, so I'm glad you keyed in on that theme. Red Rising particularly focuses on leadership because of the smaller stakes, and it is the Bildungsroman of a hero. Like it's the journey to how Darrow becomes a different sort of leader, right? One who is different from the ones who came before. And I think that good leadership should always be a burden. If it's not a burden, we should question that leader if it's not a burden to them.
Agreed.
I think particularly in the modern day and age, and probably throughout time, it's a different sort of creature who wants to become leader. A different sort of creature that wants that control. Certainly there's people there that want to fix problems and serve. But I think there's two ways of looking at a leader, I think. Either the leader is a personification of the people they lead, culmination of the people they lead, hopefully the wise culmination, but not often, or the leader sculpts the people that lead them in his image or their image. And so I think fundamentally those two different types of leaders. Darrow is a culmination. Many of the gold leaders are the opposing type of leader who sculpt everyone into their image to see the world how they want it to be. I find there to be more power in someone who's a culminating leader. Not to say that Darrow, of course, because he's a fictional character, refuses the call. But there's been many leaders throughout time who have resisted the call. But at the same time, there's been leaders who have sought the call, who have been hungry for it, like Alexander the Great. But Alexander the Great was only a leader because his father Philip had united Macedon, had turned Macedon into the first privatized army, had revolutionized the phalanx by adding 4 feet of spears onto their sarissas, had created a fucking tough nut group of men, and of men, and better than that, officers, an officer corps that didn't exist anywhere else in the world. They had the first special forces can be found in Alexander's army. He inherited a lot of that. Now, granted, he knew how to use it better than any other person, but I think often, this is the line I wrote in Red God, without his friends, and Alexander's friends, his companions, they call them, it's literally the best all-star group in history. Followed by followed by no one, in my opinion. It is all-star after all-star with Seleucus, and Ptolemy. Hephaestion kind of sucks, but there's just, Telemachus? Is it Telemachus? No, Antipater and Antipater's sons. He has so many generals and friends who are gifted beyond belief, and they all grew up together. And so I wrote the new book, hopefully it stays. Alexander would not have conquered the world without his friends. But with Alexander, his friends might have. So a leader, to me, provides the thesis, right?
Yeah.
And those guys would have been capable of conquering the world, but did they have the guts? Did they have the hubris to think they could? Did they have the thesis to do so? Would they have stopped, 1/3 of the way, being like, that's enough, we don't want to overextend? But Alexander, filled with this crazy spirit, because he was, like, in many ways our first social media star, because he had a litany of scribes and reporters writing back every day to Macedon to report on his victories, to be there when he did gallant things. And then he would do certain things because it was honoring his great hero Achilles. He didn't model himself after Odysseus, after Agamemnon, after Menelaus, after Ajax, after Diomedes. He modeled himself after Achilles, a vain, self-absorbed hero who was not a strategist. If he had been a wise leader, he would have modeled himself after Odysseus. But instead, he was passion. Yeah. Passion for a beautiful, beautiful death and an everlasting legend. And because of that, this infrastructure all around him that was developed by a wise leader, his father had his own problems, but he a wise leader in terms of systems and in terms of understanding how things were put together and all this stuff. You had fire fashioned to a chariot that flowed perfectly, right? And so I think leaders are often that. They can be that kind of inspirational leader. And Dune's also a meditation on this. Dune warns about a messianic leader. And then it promotes a monstrous leader who's actually does the bloody arithmetic of rule in a way that is inhuman, godlike, and is actually a better leader, but everyone hates him. And so, better to be loved or hated, right? Or loved or feared is also a question. So I don't have an answer on leadership, but I do think that a leader is one who will never ask someone to do something they wouldn't do themselves if they had the time, right?
Yeah.
Not because it's beneath them, but if they have the time. And so I think Darrow leads that way. But Darrow also leads in a way that shows that leadership is about convincing people that if you hurt the cause, if you hurt another member of the group, then you hurt the leader because they're essentially the same body, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And so that's why Darrow has that moment with Tactus later on. Darrow is showing the gruesome violence that Tactus is doing to the personification of the group, which is the leader, right?
Yeah.
You're not doing this to someone who's beneath you. You're not doing this to someone. You're doing this to the body of us. And I am the body. So if you look at Christ, Christ is meant to be a personification, right, of an idea. And so the body of Christ, right? And the church is one entity, a person from the church. The church is not a physical object. It's the united group. And so this is used in religion. It's used in many different things. But I find that it's also like if you look at Silicon Valley, some of the leaders who rise up, and they might have tons of flaws, right? Tons of flaws, and they might have a lot of things to learn about leading, like my fictional Darrow does. But at the same time, they are channeling an animating spirit and creating a culture, right? Mm-hmm. So leaders of companies are very different than leaders of governments, right? Or leaders of people. But have you ever done an escape room?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I've seen in escape rooms of doing them is like the person who wants to be leader at the first and is kind of bossy always ends up being the quietest at the end because eventually they piss people off because they want to be in control. So in small groups, we can feel this, right? In big groups, it's hard to see that. You don't know the personality behind closed doors of certain leaders, right? They wear masks. In a small group, hard to wear a mask unless you're just that advanced. But the bossy ones are usually the quiet ones at the end because they get humbled because escape rooms use a lot of different types and sides of your brain, right? They might be the smartest. They might have gotten a perfect SAT score. They're not going to be able to get out of that room by themselves, right? So then from that, either like a council of leaders arrives that rule a little more with a little more equanimity, or one arrives who suggests things or like, wait, let's listen to Sarah. Or Sarah, what were you saying? It ignores the leader. And there's a subtle shift. There's always a subtle shift after frustration sets in an escape room that I've noticed at least.
Yeah. Who are you in the escape room?
Whoever I need to be.
Oh,
I think when I was young. No, I think when I was younger, I was a little. I liked the idea of being a leader, and so I probably know that the bossy one or like the really streperous one is usually the quietest at the end because I felt my own humility, injected into me by social groups, So I got humbled, and once I got humbled, then I could just see, there's a lot of wisdom that can be found in being humbled. You can either form a vendetta or you can get wise, right? So fortunately, I try to get wise. So whoever I need to be, it's for the group. Like I used to be really competitive. Still I am, but like, not to a negative degree any longer. As long as as long as I'm thinking about it, which is like 95% of the time, because I'm like, what's the goal of a game? The goal of the game is to have fun, right?
Yeah.
The goal of the game is to be like, I used that time well, right?
Yeah.
So what's the point in winning if I'm a dick, you know? What's the point in
Yeah,
winning
right.
if I was stressed out the whole time? Have you guys ever seen that Monopoly experiment they do where they fix the game? Basically, they I think they either weight the dice or something, but they fix the game, and the winners, like people who are winning, usually talk a lot more. As soon as they start winning, they start talking more, and they start using certain words that are demeaning. So they start being demeaning and talking about themselves more, talking about how much money they have. They start gloating, even though they didn't deserve it. And it's like this study showed that what people do with perceived power, they perceive that they're better. You know, I think the problem of the monarchy and aristocracy in general is that people think that because they inherited silk, they're better than the people who have mud on their shoes. But that's not true. That's a survival mechanism because they need to believe that, right?
Right.
And so I think the best type of leader, is one that doesn't mind the mud on their shoes, that understands that just because someone is better at hewing down a tree and someone is better at doing the arithmetic of court doesn't necessarily separate them from fundamental human rights and dignity, right?
Yeah.
The remuneration might be different because of scarcity, again, and rarity of skill sets. But that doesn't mean that they should have different rights, and it doesn't mean that they should be looked down on or treated differently. They're all part of the body. And so that's the kind of leader that I would like to promote in my books. Sorry, long-winded, but...
No,
I love
that's
that.
great. I feel like you have so many. As you were talking, I was like filtering through, like, your characters are all leaders in their own right. I think there's like high leaders, and then there's like mentor leaders, and there's like public servants. Like, I think Mustang's brand of leadership is so different than like Victra's. I feel like
Watch your spoilers,
I
baby
know
girl.
I have to be really
Yeah,
careful
and see,
about
it's
spoilers.
so complex, isn't it, right? Not my books, but like the types of leaders that there can be. Mustang's eyes are on the horizon. Darrow's are in front of the obstacle in front of them. But to get to the horizon, you need the guy that'll go through the obstacle in front of him and take everyone with them. But then he gets to the top he gets through the obstacle and everyone's with him, and he's like, I don't know what to do now, because he hasn't been thinking about the next thing. So then that's when the other leader is like, thank goodness I have you to do this, because I couldn't empower people to do that. You know?
Yeah, I feel like that reminds me so much of one of my favorite characters, which is Severo. Like, literally, if Severo was a real human, I would marry that man. I'm obsessed with how feral he is, and just like how passionate he is, and like unhinged. And I'm just like, how did 22-year-old Pierce Brown come up with Severo? Like, why did you feel like you needed a Mustang and you needed a Severo? Like, where did that come from?
Motifs I've seen, like my take on motifs I've seen. You know, I kind of grew up with a guy who's a little bit like Severo. He's the only character that's kind of based on someone. Just parts of it. It wasn't like whole, like, you know, I'm going to put my friend Alex in the books. No, but I had a friend who was scrawny, skinny, freckled, jank-toothed, redhead, who, you know, accidentally lit a barn on fire with me one time, who,
amazing,
like, you know, would just commit various acts of vandalism through the neighborhood, and then also like help me build forts. And it was just a cool neighborhood when I lived in the country in Iowa. And you know, one time I got in a fight, and you know, I was a little bit more, how would I say, stereotypical jockey than him, you know. And so one time I got in a fight with a guy, and then you know, Alex, we hadn't been friends because middle school you find different cliques and stuff. He just jumps on their back and starts like biting them, you know, amazing, like out of nowhere. Yeah, and like I'd done a disservice to Alex, and he wasn't cool, so I just wasn't as close with him. And he wasn't, you know, on the same team and everything, so it just kind of drifted apart. But then he's still there, you know, doing that thing. Lo and behold, he reconnects me in his 20s because I was giving a shout out when I was talking about Sever earlier on. And he's like 6'4", 6'3", built. He was an MMA fighter, tattoos everywhere. Like, he became Sever when he was away. Yeah, he became Sever when I was away. And I was like, what the hell? And he's like,
the glow up.
Yeah, now he has like 5 kids, you know, and has a wife who looked like Victra. And then and then also like his job is high altitude, like power line operating, like fixing repairs, like dangerous shit. So I'm like, maybe I was spot on with that personification, with that
I
character.
think so.
Like I saw him, we hung out, and I was like, holy shit, you got big. Yeah, but yeah, Several to me was always that kid who was soft and gentle inside, but the world so abused him and was so prepared for rejection that he became a monster, so the world wouldn't try to reject him because he already rejected it. And I think that we all have a little bit of that in us, particularly introverts who like books.
I think maybe you've got iconic leaders that come in many shapes and forms, but I also think maybe you have, maybe this is a branch of leadership, but I think that you have people who are willing, I don't know how to say this without spoilers, but people who are willing to become the symbol, even if it means they have to stop leading for whatever reason. And I'm thinking of people, I'm thinking of characters like Ephraim, Cassius. Like I'm thinking of characters who, when the rubber meets the road and they have to live their ideals, and that might mean like no one can follow them where they're going.
Well,
and I think that,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah. What would you say about that? Would you call that a leader, or is that more like a different thing?
I would call it a paragon. I think leadership is a verb.
Right.
And I think that they are paragons, like individuals who, not to be an example for other people, but sometimes, but mostly to defeat some demon or to live up to something in themselves they've always been too cowardly to face, finally live up to that. Finally accept the cost of living up to the ideal they've always been too afraid to embrace. And Cassius was negotiating with the cost of that for a long time. He wanted to be a good man, right?
Yeah.
But to be a good man would have to recognize a lot of things that are fundamentally flawed in the ecosystem that has lifted him up to its greatest heights. And so rejecting that would be to reject his place and reject himself and realize that his dalliances with pinks were much different than he presumed or convinced himself to presume. So, in many ways, they have to destroy the old idea of themselves in order to become the new idea, right?
Yeah.
It's a hard compromise.
Yeah, very hard. And I think that's why your stories hit people so emotionally. All right.
Good.
I know we got to let you go here. We've got one last look to the future.
Yeah, let's look at that horizon here.
Today, this comes out, which is the Red Rising Deluxe Edition. It's my special copy, and it's got all this gorgeous imagery. And so very excited for that to release. And then it's working on Red God. And then 2 other projects I can't share anything about in the Red Rising world. And also the Book of Lorne, which is an online comic. The Book of Lorne, which is an online comic, which one of my favorite characters is Lorne Arcos. And in the books, he's, I don't get to explore him as much as I wanted to. And so I wanted to explore him in comic book format because I didn't have time to write another book. And also because I think that it lends itself well to myth. It lends itself well to like small stories. But it's an online comic on Patreon. You find it via Lit Escalates or Shit Escalates. Go to either Lit Escalates at on Instagram or lit-escalates.com, and you can find your way to the Patreon. So basically, releasing 20 to 30 page comics every month, along with behind the scenes, like kind of an HBO style commentary. And also prose section, which follows Darrow trying to get Lorne to train him, which are about 10 to 20 page prose sections before each one. So part of a novel and then a comic book. So I wanted to do that. It was an idea I cooked up between Red God and Lightbringer because I always need a breather. And that was my breather. Now it's just kind of editing, and I have a team formed around it to put it out there. And then it allows me to focus all my time on Red God while giving the mad loyalists some more content.
Amazing. And
we love that.
Timeline-wise, Book of Lorne takes place between Red Rising and Golden Sun?
Correct. Yes, but all the stories are from Lorne's past, and it's how he got all those famous quotes that he uses on Darrow.
Amazing.
Cool. Oh, that's going to be so exciting. Fun. We'll put the link in the description for everybody if you guys want to check that out, check out the comic. And
Yeah. So then the only other thing we want to share about coming up is my birthday is October 26th.
Oh.
And yes, I don't know if you know this, Pierce, but your team has agreed that you will go live with us on my birthday on TikTok.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to have a part 2, which is just going to be audience Q&A since we've gotten
Sure.
to ask all of our questions. But yes, they did agree to that. I don't know if you agreed to that, but your
Well,
team
happy
did.
birthday. Sure. I'm sure I did in an email somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they were like, he'll do a pre-recorded on the 14th for the special edition, and then we'll do a birthday live. So hope you guys will come hang out for the live on TikTok.
Yeehaw.
That will be the 26th, and you guys get to ask all the questions. So
All the questions.
Gosh.
we will just moderate and hang out because that'll be so exciting.
Well, Pierce, you have been so generous with your time, not only giving us our favorite books, other than Lord of the Rings, okay?
Other than Lord of the Rings,
we just got to
say
say
You don't need to be
it.
sacrilegious here. It's okay.
No,
Wink,
it's okay.
wink.
But truly, just so glad that your brain translated to your hands to write an amazing series for all of us to enjoy. This was a really good time. You are hilarious. I had actually no idea that you had that turtle comedy up in there.
From Freddy the Turtle.
Yeah.
To
Well, see, this is why
Lightyear.
this is why I never read questions beforehand, because then I scheme, and it's better to just
why
be like,
that?
I don't know why I started talking about turtles for 15 minutes, but here we are.
That was the best. That's all we needed.
It's okay. It filled my cup. I don't know about yours, Maddie, but I feel like my cup is full.
Overflowing.
And you have a great night. It was such a good time. Thank you for coming.
Kristen, thank you. Maddie, thank you. Say hi to your husband, Maddie.
I will. He's
Mitch,
gonna be so stoked to listen. Yeah, Mitch. He's gonna know
What up, Mitch?
every single reference that you threw out. Like
Phenomenal.
massive history nerd. So he's gonna be thrilled.
Well, tell him I'm reading about the Samnite Wars tonight.
The Samnite Wars. He's doing a deep dive on the Great World War, he calls it, because he refuses to call it World War One.
Yeah.
He's calling it the Great World War, and he's reading like 10 different.
He probably calls it the Great War.
The Great War, exactly.
Yeah.
He calls it whatever the British call it because he refuses to call it
The
World
Great
War
War.
One.
Yep.
Yeah, he's doing a deep dive on it at the moment for us, actually, so he can give us the cliff notes.
Tell him to look at Faces of Battle if he hasn't.
Faces of Battle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we will write it down and we will remember. Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
This was
Thanks
fun.
to everyone else for listening, and we'll see you guys on the 26th where you guys can share your questions, and we will see you all in the next episode.
Bring your party hats.
Bye.
Ciao.
Yeah, but we feel good together. If I could just get over myself.